Greetings, Commanders. I'm Paul.
And I'm Connor.
And today we're going to have a little fireside chat and talk about the roadmap for 2025.
But I think the first thing for us to jump into is those big features that we talked about back in the year ahead last year. The major one that we had been focused on at the time was Instance PvP Universe, right? That eventually came out as the Arena.
Yeah. The Arena was something that we knew that we wanted to really put something that was accessible for as many people as possible. With the free repairs, being able to be something that you could jump into, with a squad from your alliance, and with something that we're still investing into, and something that we're looking at, on our roadmap coming up in next year, trying to make sure that we expand that. And even looking at things like allowing you to group up in your squad with people from outside of your alliance, and just trying to make it easier to jump into that new gameplay mode.
Yeah, it was really interesting when we were going through the development, like thinking through changing how we build. Like that was a lot of what we were talking about at the end of last year, thinking about how we build for the game, how we make sure we're giving things the best chance for success. And the Arena was one of the main ones that we focused in on for that. Team were building like prototypes for that, even when we were looking at the year ahead last year, looking at what kind of gameplay we needed. How do we find that balance between just raw deathmatch and send people off to blow each other's ships up, or gameplay that actually matches what we need for Star Trek. So understanding the PvE components and how scoring can work and getting a lot more of that into there. I think the end result worked out really well.
Yeah, and that's something that we want to try and expand on. We know that we've had a lot of great feedback of people who have been able to interact cross-server, and that's something that we want to try and build more gameplay around off into the future. Another big one that we delivered on from the last roadmap update was Alliance games, now Alliance tournaments as it came out to be. We know that the Alliance is so core to people's sort of reason why they play Trek, being able to work together as a group, and that was really something that we wanted to try and dive more into, give a new challenging tournament bracket for people to be able to try and compete against other alliances, and again something that we wanted to do that was sort of region wide. And really trying to expand your horizons. Obviously, competition within your server, but also looking at how people are competing, across their entire region.
Yeah, got to reflect back on what happened there as well. As we look at the Arena, felt like we learned a lot from our previous releases on how we approach things. Didn't learn as much when it came to Alliance games, and definitely some misses for us as we went through there. And we really wanted to focus in on that feeling of excitement, like that tension and competition, like the promotion and relegation moments, that chance in the middle of each one of those tournaments. Like, do we push? Do we try and get ourselves into the next tier? Do we get those more rewards? Or did we slip up and we're actually falling a little bit behind? The other alliances are doing a little bit more than us, and we might get relegated and get knocked back. And those kinds of that tension and that's where we felt the interest would be. And honestly, it didn't really start coming across until recently. We had to change a lot of what we did with the tasks, had to look at the scoring, had to look at feedback from the players. But, seeing that starting to turn around and being able to respond has been really interesting.
Yeah, and it's something that we took it, offline for a number of weeks to try and make sure that we could come back and make sure that we're trying to provide a much better experience for players going forward.
As we consider what we're going to do in the future with that, really making sure that we're bringing that variety of gameplay in, right? The tasks you're doing, the types of things you're being asked to do should really promote a varied alliance with lots of different capabilities and lots of different members, all doing different types of gameplay, rather than just being one particular type. And we've a way to go to get there, but I think the end result and the feature and the tech that we built gives us the opportunity to do that as we go into 25.
Yeah. Another thing that we did this year was our first crossover. That was one that, we wanted to try and find something that, we knew that, Star Trek, people who love Star Trek would enjoy. And with the 25th anniversary of Galaxy Quest, that was really a moment where we were able to find something that we knew that was really near and dear to our audience's hearts. And as part of that release, we also had the first instance of our dynamic boss hostiles with the invasion events. And, that's something that we know we want to do more of in the future. We want to try and, be able to make the game world feel more alive and more engaging, and be able to have challenges that can come into the game and, not be something that needs to live forever, but can, really feel like, you had that. I know something that you like to talk about quite a bit is having those, I was there moments.
Yeah. I think as I kind of think back on 2024, it was a year of us starting some of the things that we're going to end up doing more of in the coming years. The arena, the regional gameplay, the alliance level competition, like looking wider, but then also as we look at the game itself and trying to make it more of an interesting space to be in. There's so much you can get from the dynamism between different players and different player groups, which is awesome to see. Like that's where those moments come from, right? Where different alliances are competing. But when it comes to our own ability to create a proper living universe for the players, that's where some pieces like the dynamic boss hostiles start stepping in. And it's only small, like that's kind of the first foray in our ability to make the world change as we need to and have it alter and adapt based on events or things that we want to try and manage. But as we go into the future, there could be more of that. Like we want to make it feel like it's a really dynamic universe to be part of, that it reacts and it changes, and we make a game that is interesting and novel as you come in, but also doesn't stop you from doing your regular gameplay as well. And I think that's one of the balances we really need to watch.
Yeah, really, really trying to make sure that our players are feeling like they're in a living, breathing Star Trek world.
Yeah, I mean, given all of the things that we're trying to bring in with the changes in the IP, we brought a lot of new parts of the season apart from Galaxy Quest. All of the other arcs that we brought in across the year, trying to make sure that we're continuing to keep up with the IP and making sure that it's a good place you can go to for a source for the franchise.
There's some challenges with Enterprise, having a ship that has no shields, and trying to, balance that and bring that into the world. But, we also had, again, new challenges coming in there with the Shroomies and the other hostiles that we added as part of that one.
It was a strong start to the year. It was a little bit tougher on January as we made that introduction, but what we wanted to do was kind of set up that there would be a core element across a number of months that you'd be able to build up against that over a period of time. Had some different ideas for March that we never really managed to bring to a conclusion, but that kind of a set of hostiles that were truly challenging. And we need to do more of that, right? Create real, true challenges in the environment for the players to go after. But then also matching that against the ship and looking at how the ship encourages a different type of crewing, different type of combat. You need to consider it differently. Talk a little bit about like primary and secondary fun, that fun of solving that puzzle. And we hadn't seen that in Trek for a long time before the Enterprise arc.
Yeah.
And it came in with those hostiles, and it's something that we want to do more of in the future.
Yeah.
Like encourage that variety.
Create challenges in the game that, make you think about exactly how you're setting up your crew, and that, gets you out of that sort of, the day-to-day experience.
But I think the good one with Enterprise was, it was interesting. And we talked a little bit about how, which we bring the franchises that many people have seen and loved and characters that they love, and we bring them into Fleet Command and represent them in the best way that we can to find a space for them in the overall universe. I think it's one of the places where not as many people had watched Enterprise, right? We did it last because it wasn't really the one that everybody was looking for.
There's still so much untread ground in terms of, Star Trek has so much that we haven't explored.
Yeah. Coming up on 60 years of content, there's so much that we need to go after still.
Yeah.
But it's also worth us considering as we look back in 24 before we dive into what we're going to do in 25, the things where we missed, right? Like there was a lot of good things that we feel like we added to STFC as a game, and we did a lot of like interesting content changes and a lot of things we tried to deliver, but we delivered things as well that didn't land the way we needed. We touched on it briefly with Alliance Games, that launch wasn't what we wanted it to be. No. It didn't deliver what it needed to be. We also talked a lot about at the start, like adding more bug fixes and better stability. And while we look very closely at things like like crash rates and response rates on the client, and those have been generally improving. They're not at the, we're not able to get to the level we want to be there yet. And then as we look at the overall server quality, right, we still have a lot of challenges when it comes to lag and performance and responsiveness, and making sure that we're giving the right experience to our players. So there are definitely misses there where we didn't put the focus in the right areas. We were launching things. We weren't making sure that things would operate at the level we needed them to. Like real weaknesses and real misses for us. Big things on how we need to try and change how we approach 2025, and kind of bringing that. How do we make sure that the service level that the player base are getting is at the right level? And that's definitely one of the major topics we talk about a lot at the moment.
In our quest to make sure that we are, keeping the game fresh, trying to, every single month provide an amazing experience for everyone, that we need to do better than what we did this last year.
Yeah. A lot of what we're looking at as we've expanded the scope of the game is looking at the areas that have become more fragile in how the game is operated overall. There's some key areas that we've already started working on to tackle those for next year, but they're definitely not at the level they need to be right now, and we didn't serve them correctly in the past 12 months.
Yeah, and it is something that the team is, actively working on and actively pursuing. We've got fixes going out for the Kirshara artifact, and trying to make sure that we have so many things in the game that we are trying to get as many bug fixes in there as possible, trying to make sure that we can make the game, the game that we want it to be, the game that we love, better and better.
Yeah, and looking at how October and then November and into December has been going so far, we released a number of things that are trying to improve that stability, but they're incremental. They're not at the level they need to be, but it'll be a continuous improvement that we'll be focused on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I suppose we should definitely spend some time talking about what's coming.
Yeah, we know that the quality of life improvements that we put out fairly recently, I know the smart speed ups is definitely one that the team has enjoyed.
The single greatest update that we've released in Star Trek.
But we've got more of quality of life improvements that we are prioritizing. As you said, we've got some more improvements to the Kirshara artifacts. We've got a number of other things that we are working on. One that's been requested quite a bit is being able to skip some of the animations. Great when you see it the first time. When it's your 10,000th time seeing it, maybe it's not something that you want to go through. And we know that there are things that are, as the game has aged, maybe weren't a problem in year one, but are becoming more and more of a problem. So we've got a number of different things that we want to improve. The refinery, another one where, we know that players are spending a lot of time, too much time in the refinery, and we need to speed up that experience to be able to let you get through and really give you more control, right? So we don't want it to be something that is going to force you into sort of making suboptimal choices to get through it faster. We want to try and find that nice balance, right? Of I feel like I can get exactly what I want, but I'm not having to spend 15, 20 minutes a day just going through and hitting the refinery buttons.
Yeah, like there's so many spaces in the game, the speed ups being one of the examples that emphasize it, that we have, as we've added in new content and different content, we've not changed the user experience or the flows to handle that kind of change. Yeah. And it's even crewing a ship, even with presets and everything, even those things have become a challenge. So each thing needs time and attention to try and make sure it's getting better. But right now, I think you're spot on. Yeah. That like refinery flow, the number of tabs, the number of buttons, the number of buckets, and making the choices on whether you're spending or not spending.
And improving the, I'm not sure whether or not, hopefully people have felt it, but, trying to speed up, when players are going into the event UI or, the spinner that everybody sees all over the game. We want to try and find ways of reducing the amount of time that people are having to wait for screens to load. We know that there's lots of sources of lag in the game, both in terms of the UI, in terms of responsiveness of the game. As you said, the team is working on a lot of those fixes.
Yeah, there were decisions made when we launched the game around like how do we approach memory decisions on the number of scenes you can load, things like that are just not valid anymore. And really, it's taking the moment to reflect on what that means and how we can approach things differently. It's a significant load to go through each one of those, but each one that we change is an incremental improvement. And a couple of them, like you said, have already gone live. We can keep that going.
We also know that a couple other big things that have been requested, getting housing spaces in systems, more information at the galaxy level. So being able to see missions that you need to complete has been a popular one that's been requested, as has getting housing systems on there, right? So I know that, making sure that we can surface the right level of information that people are looking for is going to be something that we want to try and find a spot for in our roadmap next year.
And so, if we go past the quality of life, what kind of things are we going to be looking at for features and changes?
So we are definitely, as we said before, trying to look at how can we make it easier in the arena to group up with people. We know that not every single alliance is going to have folks around your level. We've made changes already to try and improve the matchmaking, but we want to try and open that up to public squads. So public squads is going to allow you to group up with other people from outside your alliance. Something that the team is actively working on at the moment. And, we're excited to see that one coming out. And, again, trying to make sure that, we are supporting the gameplay mode, the arena gameplay mode that just came out, making sure that, we've also had feedback from players that, they want to make sure that these things are being supported and, being actively taken forward and taken to the next level.
I think when the team were talking about that kind of public squad and some of the challenges that are there, like there's basic challenges that you can expect in terms of building it, but then even things like, well, Armadas just expects you to be inside in one alliance. So when you're not in one alliance, what does an Armada do? And it's just little edge cases like that, but also in going through those edge cases, they give us other potential improvements we can release in the future too. And I think there's some nice stuff we'll be able to look at around like what it means to tackle armadas in the future too, right?
Yeah. As you said, as part of that exploration, somebody was like, oh, wait, how are you going to do armadas? It's going to be, opening up additional technology within the game that, again, opens up new possibilities, like the possibility of doing an armada with a group from folks outside your alliance is something that, may be possible in the future based off of that work.
So a very interesting thing for our high level space. I know when we were talking about like doing more challenging armadas for like the G6 and hitting those higher levels, especially at the top end of G6, just having enough players in a single alliance that'll be able to tackle that challenge kind of made it not something that would be really exciting to hit on day one, right? It might be useful in a year or 2 years where you have enough of a group, but really it's not right now. But if we remove that restriction, suddenly you can bring your players again, or you can bring large groups of players from across the system against them. And then we can do something far more interesting when it comes to balance.
Absolutely.
So what else do we have coming up in 25?
Well, independent archives just came out recently. We definitely want to make sure that, we're supporting bringing more ships into the independent archives, really helping to, we've heard a lot of feedback about wanting to be able to try and streamline gameplay, or be able to focus on the things that people want to do and take away some of the elements that people don't want to focus on anymore, right? A lot of people have been playing this game for many, many years, and we want to try and streamline that. Definitely things like G6 freebooters are something that the team's been actively discussing, and other things that can help just streamline people's gameplay. So how do we bring more people together? How do we try and make sure that you're playing with your friends more frequently?
Yeah, I think that going back to the independent archives, it's definitely been interesting as a group when we look at that, considering that it's now creating an end state for game loops. We had, if you look all the way back, we'd never really talked about that as a team. We always talked about, like, as people are going through the various loops or using their ships in the game, that there's always a claim or a purpose, or it's kind of evergreen. And I think one of the things they're really thinking about is, like, that's not actually the best way for us to approach this. Like, we should be considering what it means to feel like I've completed something and been able to move on to something else.
Yep. Be able to spend your time on the things that you want to spend it on, and not feeling like, I have to go through and I'm tied to, I have to do every single one of these loops every single day, or I'm not sort of being as optimized as I can be. Yeah. How do we, as you say, make it feel great to complete some of these things, and then move on to other bigger, better challenges?
Yeah, and that ends up being a change in, like, our overall value and what we think about when we're putting out new content or new updates for the game. Is that, like, it's not just about how do we make sure it's exciting at the start or even while you're in the middle of getting things delivered, but how do we make the feeling of completing it great? Right? How do I make it feel like I'm delighted I invested in this particular thing. I've put my time in. I've overcome the challenges. I've got myself into a really good place. I'm done now. I want to move on to something else. And so I can kind of wrap it up in a neat little package and put it aside, and we can move on to other things. Because we'll keep looking for new novel experiences for our players in the game. And so we want to make sure that they're having the opportunity to jump in there.
We also are looking at, trying to improve the way that players are communicating, both sort of in and outside the game, and sort of what that means.
Even at a first case, like spending the time to make sure that we're encouraging people to become part of our Discord group itself, doing some of the legwork. I know a lot of our alliances push heavily to try and make sure their alliance members are members of their Discord spaces. We can do that part as well, right? If we make sure that people are already connected with that, it gives us a good chance to be able to speak to them directly. And then as we look into the future, there are other opportunities for us to see what kind of things can we do with Discord or other communication channels to try and make sure that we're connected to the players and we're being as informative as we possibly can.
We've got some exciting new IP coming into the game next year as well. Some things that'll be recognizable to players, and IPs that we have visited previously. Also, some brand new ones that haven't been shows that we haven't touched on, or the movies have been something. Obviously, we have a lot of the amazing J.J. Abrams movies in the game, but a lot of the older movies we haven't touched on in the game yet. Yeah. But first and foremost, Voyager, we're going to be coming back to. It is the 30th anniversary of Voyager, so we're excited to be going back to Voyager, and we're going to be exploring a couple different parts of that series. We're going to be potentially seeing Captain Proton making an appearance, and we're also going to be visiting some of the fan favorite episodes, the Year of Hell being the one that I think we're going to be touching on in the very near future.
A nice one for us to be considering as we start jumping off. It's always an interesting title for you to decide to pick for to get us really going. The Year of Hell, but to be fair, one of the greatest episodes and greatest sections of Voyager that's ever been put to film. There was that fun conversation of, do we do an entire arc based on Captain Proton? Or there was do you remember the version that we did of a
healthy debate about whether or not how black and white we should make the characters and the narrative and everything.
Every time you go into the transporter room, you just have the whole thing would go into a black and white. We change all the models. It was definitely a pitch. we won't be doing that. We're not going that far. But bringing that into the storyline and then focusing in on the Year of Hell and what that meant and the Temporal War and everything is just really interesting. So I'm really excited to see how that lands. Really happy to be going back to Voyager. I think it's definitely one of the strongest sources for a lot of stories that we can dive into. And, as an opening, it's a good group for us to dive into straight away.
Also, there's a new Section 31 movie that is going to be coming out soon on Paramount Plus. That is something that we're looking at exploring next year, diving into, a little bit more of the, clandestine side of the Federation. I think that, the team is really excited about, getting back in there. It's been a while since we dove back into some of the Discovery characters and Discovery storylines. So excited to be able to return to some of those characters and to do something alongside the upcoming movie.
Yeah, keeping nice and close to as it's going out. Really excited to see how that kind of adds more to the IP overall, kind of a different storyline, but built on characters that already exist. And then in our own space, like how we weave that into what we've already done with Disco, some of the characters we've got in. I do remember when we launched Disco and we did the crossover with our own in-game mod, and then we brought in like the Disco mod and the storyline around that. It's not as interwoven as that particular moment, but still having that chance to bring some of those characters back to the forefront. This will be our third Michelle Yeoh in the game.
Not as many as our Spocks or
not as many Spocks or Picards, but getting up there with the number of characters that are in, our number of times she's in as a character. But yeah, it's exciting movie, and the representation the team have taken on and how they bring that into the game, I think, has given us some interesting things to dive into.
Wrath of Khan. We're
objectively the second best film.
We are exploring more of the Trek cinematic universe. So we'll be visiting Wrath of Khan a little bit later on next year. Khan is a character that we've covered through sort of multiple iterations of storylines throughout Trek. Exciting to explore another version of that.
The classic Khan.
Classic.
Bring it back in. I think everybody knows exactly what the hailing frequency will be on that particular release.
Yes.
As we start thinking about like later into the year, I think one of the things you were touching on a little bit that we need to consider is what the arena and that regional based like cross server gameplay means for what we can do in the future. And I think some of the things that the team have been exploring on a different evolution of what that means to explore like an instance version of space and bring exploration to the forefront again.
Yeah.
As we start considering this game, some of the features on what that will be as we get later in the year, I'm genuinely excited by what's being pitched. Number of things we need to overcome and a lot that we need to learn from what we did in 2024. But as we start looking into it, I think it opens up a whole new way of playing into what the game would be, or different aspect on what you're trying to dive into. So
yeah, we want to try and
subspace
find
efforts.
New ways that players can work together, connect with each other, explore space. Boldly going and exploring brave new worlds is definitely something that we want to try and get into a little bit more in 2025.
And so yeah, let's consider what we're going to do next year, get ourselves started, and I suppose we should probably wrap up at that. So Commanders, thank you very much for spending the time with us.
Live long and prosper.